No Hair, All Heart continues baldly and passionately with reading number 16 from Jonnie Fazoolie and the Transfinite Reality Engine. Blaming Einstein. The transition couldn't be more striking as Basine takes a seat in the back row. Moving from one raving maniac to a room full of them isn't much progress, but at least lunch will soon be served. Sometimes her cynicism annoys even herself, so she tries to dial it down, but gives up the nanosecond she tunes into the lecture. Gwatch, she says loud enough to cause ASD heads to turn. Shh, shushes an attendee, using the chance to wink at her. At least this lecture is measurement-based and data-intensive, alleging the perceived rate of time flow in the early universe was impacted by extreme energy density and curved space-time. Science journalists will, of course, twist this observational evidence from primordial supernovae into sensationalist clickbait headlines for author attention, media ad dollars, and funding. In this case, time didn't run slower because time is relative based on motion and causation, and the causation and motion were different in the early universe. But don't tell the press. Don't tell academicians and science popularizers like Mikio Keanu either. String theory to quantum supremacy proving more fiction than science, designed to create hype, get attention. In that sense, today's fundamental physics community is populated by a horde of smart Fazoolies, by comparison making the dumb Fazoolie she just met more transparent and therefore credulous. The topic shifts her mood from righteous indignation to bored acquiescence. She insists most academic science these days, especially particle physics, can't be described as scientific. Lacking any new data outside the parameters of established theory, physicists have turned to pure math and wild speculation to model hypothetical realities none of today's tech can even measure. Surrounded by many of the world's greatest mathematical theoreticians, ostensibly disguised as physicists and cosmologists, Basine ruefully blames her hero, Albert Einstein. Yes, that guy. She's reminded of the truism that the biggest success exposes the winner to the greatest risk of future failures. Or, as the bard observed in As You Like It, having too much of a good thing. The quote suggests the temptations created by victory are second only to the hubris that fuels it, or in Einstein's case, exemplified by the uncanny power of his transformative thought experiments. Einstein's first gig after college was at the Swiss Patent Office near the train station in Bern, reviewing and writing opinions about patent applications for various technical inventions. Noodling around at this desk from March through September 1905, the 26-year-old published 4 papers revolutionizing physics: the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, relativity, and E equals mc squared. Even more striking than Einstein's amazing theories and the universe-shattering ideas they proposed was the patent clerk's process. The guy never left his desk, didn't do any experiments. His thought experiments, or Gedankenexperimenten, were hypothetical situations modeled to help him think through the consequences of a proposed hypothesis or theory being true. Relying solely on data everyone else had, agonizing over the inexplicable problems everyone else agonized over, young Al used nothing more than his own imagination and ingenuity. While everyone wrestled with inertial frames and the constancy of light speed, Albert imagined trains and lightning bolts to make the bold leap that wrecked all of Newtonian classical mechanics. Jumping to the conclusion that the constancy of the speed of light could be explained by assuming space and time were contingent on the observer's frame of reference took balls. Then pursuing the implications of that radical idea and describing it mathematically took creativity and rigor. No wonder Einstein was Einstein. Who else had the chutzpah? Basine remembers the apocryphal story of Einstein lecturing on relativity throughout Europe, driven around by a prankster chauffeur who sat in the back row, suggesting they switch roles. I've seen you give that talk so many times, he claimed, that we're both bored out of our Gottverdammt minds. I bet I can deliver your lecture without anyone noticing the difference. Sehr gut, grinned naughty Albert, ready to roll and eager to chill out after doing so many lectures on their multi-city tour. He didn't factor in being a bad driver, though, and hating that job. All went well enough with their Freaky Friday ruse until Q&A afterwards, when a tall, bearded professor asked a convoluted, detailed, and esoteric question that cut to the theory's very essence. Are you joking? Frowned Albert Einstein, aka his driver. The answer to that remedial question is so easy, basic, and obvious that my uneducated chauffeur in the back row can answer it. Hilarity ensued, even though the story likely never happened. While the one about Niels Bohr living next to the Carlsberg Brewery and having his own personal tap actually was true. Anyway, genius, chauffeur, or not, the real Albert Einstein couldn't get a professorship even after revolutionizing physics. Being an academic outsider and a Jew didn't help, nor did Al's big mouth. Yes, this guy destroyed absolute space and time without even leaving his desk, thereby inspiring legions of mathematicians and scientists decades later to not leave their desks either. That was the underbelly of Einstein's victorious thought experiments, generations of zealous savants who produce little more than mountains of scientific papers every year. Whole forests shredded to address problems that don't exist with hypotheses that can't be tested, or if tested and proven wrong, then reformulated to make them untestable. Bullshit science. At the turn of the century, Einstein was a genius at the right place, at the right time, able to revolutionize physics with a piece of paper. For the past half century, the papers print themselves. Less worried about genuine progress than winning the next grant proposal, peer-reviewed pulp the fodder for tenured careers, who could blame the physics community for smelling their own farts? Basine did, and got marginalized, eventually fired. Reverse career Albert, she started in research, now reviews grant applications and attends conferences to gawk and whine. She's usually allergic to pretentious conferences where the theoreticians outnumber the experimentalists by several orders of magnitude, but the Cancun resort here makes this one tolerable. Being inundated every day by wild, groundless speculation bores and infuriates her. Yet the wild, groundless speculation of that caffeine-addicted lunatic in the lobby kind of excited her. Thus her fascination with the likes of Fazoolie, an eccentric American as a welcome distraction after hours of Dummkopf slinging turgid data points or whimsical fantasy via PowerPoint. The current speaker cites a chart alleging time flowed differently when the universe was younger, hotter, and smaller. And Basine reminisces about her own experiences as a horny teenager. Midnight Show, Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove on screen, popcorn in one hand, a classmate's schwanz in the other, and almost there, in sync with Slim Pickens riding the bomb home. At that instant, Americans, cowboys, sex, and death got indelibly etched into Basine's mind and body. A trifecta this merkwürdig Jonnie person has triggered, riding her id around the turn. Even though Basine doesn't have a type, Johnny's type by no means would, under usual circumstances, make her breathe faster, press her legs together, and moisturize during a lecture. But it does, he does, she does, and doesn't like that one bit. A control freak, Basine fancies herself dominant, in bed and out. Sex is power, power is science, her imagination running amok. If generations of theoreticians can waste billions of taxpayer dollars doing thought experiments, then Basine bestows upon herself the luxurious indulgence to conduct one of her own. Her low-cut, high-slit leather dress beneath the open laptop and hard-copy conference brochure make the subterfuge easy, perhaps too easy as her fingers and mind wander, the lecture going on. Pulse and breath quickening, she wonders why she hadn't thought of this before. So many dull talks, while distraction, pleasure, and release have been so enticing and accessible. Basine tries not to think about the uncouth American she met, but the more she does, the stronger his chiseled face and large hands enter her overheated fantasies, distracting her distraction. Something about him is quintessentially Yankee Doodle, too. Arguably just about everything. Obnoxious, uncouth, vulgar, gauche, but not churlish. He's likable, she gasps. Even sexy. Seconds, minutes, she's unable to tell the passage of time as she senses a state change. Feels the lecture has ended and the next is cued, this one to unexpected fanfare and applause. Big commotion erupts on stage, and apparently unseen behind it, as at least a dozen technicians, handlers, and unidentified others, with walkie-talkies and various specialized gear, buzz to and fro. Das ist Spitze, a fellow German physicist calls out, pumping his fists as if he were at a football game in Dusseldorf, cheering for the home team. Something big must be afoot. She feels the vibe. Excitement? At a physics and cosmology conference? How many times can the theoreticians cry wolf about their theory of everything and the experimentalists show off pricey new gear? No news is bad news in the sciences, a continuation of the status quo, where no real advances are made in our understanding of the universe or how to control it with tech developed as a result. So, as conference goers typically await an anomaly that reveals an inconsistency paving the way for new kinds of experiments, the only good news is the rare news of somebody getting laid. The mix of specialties engenders a volatile dynamic, if still professionally siloed, mix. Expertise is so specialized and demanding that particle cosmologists don't exist, but should. The press and public might consider the gap filled by astrophysicists, of course, interdisciplinary by job description. But hang out at a conference long enough and feel the void. Particle physics and cosmology are intertwined, low to high. Descriptions of things from the Big Bang to dark energy, dark matter, inflation are tied to understanding the building blocks. Outstanding questions about the universe across its largest scale, from its origin to its future, can only be answered by grasping the essence of matter, energy, the fundamental forces of nature. How did the universe begin? When and how will it end, if at all? What's its structure and why? We can only measure a small fraction of the stuff we know is out there. What the hell is it? Far as those fundamental particles go, why three generations of fermions and leptons, identical spin and charge, but across such a wide mass range? Why do neutrinos have any mass at all? Quantum gravity, a knock between scales of the very small and very large, is the key. But honest scientists admit we haven't even found the door yet. That stagnates physics and cosmology. The lack of a testable, all-inclusive theory begs the question of why particle masses and forces have their values, why matter dominates antimatter, and the identity of dark matter and energy. Better telescopes have recently revealed distinct cosmological anomalies, hinting at real progress. Yet, for decades, the huge particle accelerators have disproven more than they have proven. Question: when was the last time crisis inducing, paradigm shifting news shook up physics to the core? Answer: trick question, because even the Higgs headline in 2012 confirmed what was already known. Her colleagues not only predicted the Higgs, but had narrowed down its possible mass from 114 to about 800 giga electron volts. By 2011, LEP and Tevatron had whittled away the range to 115 to 130 giga electron volts. As America celebrated its 236th Independence Day, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN confirmed the Higgs, and right in the expected range at 125 giga electron volts, or about 133 times the mass of a proton. That magic number wasn't only in the sweet spot of its predicted mass value, but in an even sweeter and more theoretically frustrating spot for our understanding of the entire universe. A slightly more massive Higgs with a lighter top quark would suggest vacuum stability down to the Planck level, while a lighter Higgs and heavier top quark would trigger a crisis. In other words, the measured mass of 125 giga electron volts didn't demand supersymmetry or break the theoretical framework, and therefore didn't lead to any new physics, then or since. If nothing else, the Higgs filled in the final anticipated box in the Standard Model and begged the question of why the universe is so perfectly tuned to exist at all and us to evolve within it. Fast forward 13 years, and conferences like these, where Basine now masturbates through them, are desperate for some news, any news of a discovery that wasn't predicted, can't be explained. Not exactly headline worthy. Basine's heard about the new evidence for the cosmological constant not being constant, dark energy weakening. Is this what the next lecture's buzz is about? How about the so-called clumping problem, recently revealed through discrepancies between Planck mission measurements of the early universe and gravitational lensing surveys' late-time data? And what about the so-called little red dots, ubiquitous soon after the Big Bang, perhaps evolving into quasars? But those are ancient too. Explain them away as black holes? Blah. Their granddaddy, Sir Roger Penrose, granted knighthood alongside Mick Jagger and Bill Gates, postulates cyclical cosmology, time's measurable end triggering its beginning. Perhaps life and death also repeat, micro to macro, quantum to cosmological, instantaneous to eternal. Rather than a big rip, an eternally recurring big crunch will finally end all things? Turning inward to the quantum world, fresh experiments have revealed hopeful anomalies. Although higher than expected W boson mass measurements were debunked, others look viable. Examples include the muon G2 at Fermilab, showing signs of an anomalous magnetic moment, and an LHCb collaboration claiming charge parity violation in beauty lambda baryon decay. Despite speculation for speculation's sake still rampant, and her pessimism about any progress within a scientific community that shunned her, might stagnation be at long last shifting to crisis? Although the data discrepancies seem insufficient to warrant an interesting conference, let alone keynote presentation, at least something is happening now. Too bad it interrupts her fantasies. Tune in tomorrow to see what all the hubbub is about at the conference. Inquiring listeners want to know.